Welcome back to another episode of Paranormal People in association with Angry Fox Media. Today we are speaking to Danielle Close, a psychic medium from Brighton who is going to share with us some of the secrets of her craft and how she got there. I think you're going to like this one. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to Paranormal People. My name's Alex and I'm your host. Today I am with Danielle, a fifth generation psychic medium with a family history of intuition dating back to the 1800s. She discovered her abilities at the age of 5 and after overcoming initial fears, embraced her gift fully by age 20 with the help of a healer. Danielle's mission is to normalize psychic and mediumistic abilities, believing that with openness and the right training, anyone can develop these skills. She offers straightforward, no-nonsense readings that provide practical guidance for daily life. Danielle has been studying at the London College of Psychic Studies since 2017 and is fully insured by Balens Limited. She specialises in readings that connect with your energy and provide guidance with the help of spirits and loved ones, making it feel like a conversation with a friend. Hi, Danielle. Thanks for joining the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for that nice intro.
You're more than welcome. I guess the first thing to kick us off, can you explain what psychic mediumship is and how does it work?
Yes. So psychic, well, they're two separate things, but also one and the same. So when I have a client and they ask this question, I always say psychic is tuning into your energy. So that is reading someone's energy, reading where they've been, what's going on, where they're going. All the future telling stuff you hear around psychic is really like held in that space. So it's basically reading energy. That's what we do. And then mediumship is connecting with those on the other side. However you believe that, whatever you believe that other side to be, we're a bit like the phone line between them and the world here. And you get messages either way, psychically and mediumship, to kind of guide someone in a direction, break down some blocks and kind of give someone some clarity on their life, really.
That's quite interesting because you often hear the term psychic mediumship, and I've just said it there. And I guess a lot of people probably think they're very related and closely related, but actually they're not. So yeah, I've learned something there.
You can't really do mediumship without being psychic, to be honest. Like you kind of, it's two separate things, but one and the same at the same time. And I often get clients who are a bit scared of the mediumship side, so really just want psychic readings, and you can do that too. And sometimes when you're in a sitting, we call a reading a sitting. Mediumship is the only thing that comes through. So it's very varied, but you do have to be psychic in order to be a medium as well. It's kind of hand in hand.
Fascinating. Okay. And how did you first become aware of your gifts as a psychic medium?
So I never like to use the word gift, first of all, only because I see it as a skill. And the minute you say the word gift, it gives people an ego and it makes people feel like super special, like a gift. Only certain people have it. It gives me a bit of an ick. So I call it a skill. Just like some people are really good at cooking and I'm really not. So I was about 5 when I first realized something was up and I didn't really know what it was. I was really young. I was in my grandparents' house and this is going to sound insane. And people always ask me why I don't do this today. And the answer is I don't think it would happen. And it would be wrong with me. But I was watching the lottery in my grandparents' house and I wrote down all the numbers before it came on the screen. And I was like, that was insane. And as a 5-year-old young girl, it scared the bejesus out of me. And I knew just not to tell anyone. And then sequentially throughout life, lots of different things would happen where I would just know things. And I have a really strong sense of feeling. So I'd know things that were going to happen, like a volcano is going to erupt, then it would erupt. Or I'd know things about people and just really sense stuff that other people couldn't feel. And honestly, it was very terrifying. And I grew up in a very old house from 1500s. I went to boarding school, a very old boarding school that was super haunted. And I was just very attuned to something that wasn't here. And it was really, really scary. But I knew from 5 that there was something weird. Something was up.
And to ask the question that listeners will probably be wanting to ask, why don't you predict the lottery numbers now?
I mean, it definitely wouldn't work now. Honestly, I think that was just my thing to get me to realize something was up. And also you can't use your skills for that kind of thing. Otherwise it won't work. You can't really use them for like bad things or to like win loads of money. It just wouldn't happen. But maybe I should try, but I won't. Maybe I should.
And do you think there's a reason for that?
I think when it's like not meant to be, it's not going to happen anyway. So like you could pay the lottery a million times, but if it's not on your path or in your stars to win the lottery, you're not going to win it. So my belief is very much based on kind of fate and what's already written is written. So I think it just wouldn't happen. That's my kind of belief.
Okay. And with those lottery numbers, and I don't want to press on this too much, but with the lottery numbers, how did it come to you? Did you feel like somebody was controlling you to write those numbers down? How did that come about?
It's an all-knowing, honestly. So there's 6 Claires, and we can go into them later, but it was clairsentient, so it's an all-knowing. So I would just feel the number and write it down. And it's kind of hard to explain to people that don't have that sense, but where your third eye is, which I did not know what that was as a child or even as a teenager, to be honest, I would just feel the number there. So it'd be like 5, and I'd just be inclined to write it down. And it was a real sense of knowing. That was how my intuition really started, was just knowing things. And everyone starts in a different way. Some people really see things. Some people really hear things. For me, it was an all-knowing.
Okay. And do you see dead people?
I mean, that's such a funny way of saying it. I don't see dead people. When you do mediumship, I mean, some people do. Ghosts, some people see them. Some people know when that's coming for people. When you do mediumship, it's not quite like there's a person, like a ghost in the room. You feel the energy and the spirit of someone. And I do see people energetically in the room, but I don't see them like as if me and you are sitting in the room. I wouldn't see a physical person right next to you. I would feel their presence and energetically see them, but I wouldn't actually see them. And I think that's something to break down for people too, is that when people say you see dead people, you don't literally see them. And I'm sure some people do, but in my practice, I don't. I just feel the energy and I see an energetic version of them, but not a physical person.
It's interesting you say that. On episode 1 of this show, I spoke to a lady called Jennifer in Australia, and she had experiences as a teenager. And she saw her granddad in the chair, and she saw sepia tones. She didn't see him complete. Is that something you see as well? Or is that something you could maybe explain?
I don't have that skill. Well, I don't have that exact skill, but I know some people do. Everyone has a different way of utilizing their kind of ability, and what needs to happen kind of comes through for that person. So for me, it's not an all seeing. It's an all knowing. It's an all feeling. That's my strongest skill, and it does change through time. And I'm sure as my skills evolve, this might come in more. But when I see things, I see them very much in a different place in my mind. So when someone comes to a sitting and I'm talking to them, I'm often looking somewhere else in the room because I'm actually seeing something else in my mind while I'm looking at someone. So my seeing is very much based within my mind rather than physically in the room. But I'm sure this does happen for loads of people. It's just not something that's really happened physically for me. But I feel presences and I see energy shapes, but not physically people.
So it can vary from person. Yeah, it does. Yeah. So it can vary from person to person based on their abilities and their talents. Yeah.
Yeah. What your opening is. Do you know about the Claires?
I don't.
So there's 6 of them. So let me get them wrong here because I'm sure I'm going to get it wrong. There's Claire, audience, which is clear hearing. There's clairsentience, which is clear feeling. There's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, which probably most people have heard of, like clairvoyance, like being a clairvoyant. Oh gosh, I can't remember the rest of them, but if I had them in front of me, I'll tell you. But each of them are related to a different sense. So like the 6 senses, basically. And some people have stronger clairs than others. And when you start your training, you've probably got one of them really activated. And then you can kind of grow into the others. But it's so varied for everyone. It's like everyone's body is different. Everyone's way of tuning into this kind of stuff is different. It's not like a one size fits all, which is why there are so many different psychic mediums and why you've got to find the right one for you, because everyone works very differently.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And just going to rewind a little bit because you mentioned a haunted school. Are you able to tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, I went to boarding school and it's super old. It's been around, I think, since 18 something. I'm not sure. But the boarding house that I was in, and every girl that was in that house would tell you it's haunted, whether they are sensitive or not. There was just something up with the house. And actually where the school was, it's in a very activated place in the UK. It's on the Malvern Hills. That's probably what I should say. And the Malvern Hills is like a very ancient there's a lot of pagan tradition, a lot of witchcraft tradition around Malvern anyway. And there's quite a few famous people that went to our school that were very into the occult and that kind of thing. And so it's very activated as a place. And there were a lot of things that happened there that are actually unexplainable. And people not just like me would tell you that as well. But because I was super heightened to it, it was even more terrifying. When you can't explain it, when you can explain it and understand it a bit better, then it's it's not that scary. I understand what's going on here. But at the time, it was pretty gnarly.
I can imagine. Do you have any examples of a story that really stuck with you from there?
Yeah, one of them, my friend, and it sounds so minor, but when you're in a state of already heightened awareness, because it's quite scary anyway, she went upstairs to get something from her room, and she took her jumper off and put it on the bed and then turned around and she was like, oh, that's so weird. Why is the jumper not there? And then freaked out because she was like, I just took it off. I need to check the whole room. And then she left the room thinking that maybe she just left it downstairs. Walked down the stairs and it was just hanging on the mirror downstairs. And she was like, how? And then we'd have things just move, doors lock. very like what you think paranormal activity is. It felt very much like that there, which if I went back now, I might be able to feel it a bit of a different way, but it felt very much things were doing things without our control.
It is often the case, isn't it? Even the smaller things that happen to people can have the biggest impact. And what got me into the paranormal and this podcast, actually, the reason it exists is due to some experience that happened to me as a teenager with my sister. In fact, my whole family experienced them. And one of the creepiest things was things like, the remote just being there 1 second and the next it was in a different room, or you'd hear running up and down the stairs, which again, it's not something that's that terrifying, but it's these small things, I think, sometimes that really instill that fear because you can't explain it. So it's quite interesting. Now, you have mentioned that you don't necessarily see dead people as you might see in films like The Sixth Sense or all these other paranormal movies that are out. But I imagine that during readings, you must hear the dead. Is that the case? And what's it like?
Yeah, so I feel, I hear, I see. So I always say to my clients, when I first tune into people, like I feel first. And then I'm often listening while I'm talking. So I'm sort of hearing in one ear a conversation and talking in like out my mouth. It's quite hard to explain, but it feels very much like you have to differentiate when it's your brain and not you. And it's a very different channel that those words come in on. And I sometimes see the words and I hear them, but it's not like a full conversation. It's not like someone in my ear having a chit chat like we are now. It's like bits of words, bits of visuals, bits of feelings. And it's my job to paint it together and pull together the message in the right way. And that's the most important thing. A lot of people go to psychic mediums and they may hear something but then they might not feel the rest of the picture or see the rest of the thing, and they might then not get the message over correctly. So it's super important to do your training so that when you are hearing something, you can marry it up with the other stuff going on in the room to know what the message is. Does that make sense?
It does. And what kind of training did you undergo to refine your abilities that you have?
So I went to the London College of Psychic Studies, and I would literally recommend it to everyone. I do, to everyone and anyone. Because I was so terrified and I couldn't turn it off. So really what happened when I was younger, it got very heightened and it was quite traumatizing. I actually went to have a CAT scan because I thought there was something wrong with me, which there wasn't. And it was just on all the time. And I stumbled upon the college in a different story, and basically they taught me how to turn it off and how to manage it. So I basically sat in a circle every Tuesday for about 6 years with my teacher. And we learned the art of psychic mediumship, turning on, turning off, what messages mean. We practice on each other. It's like a whole education system. And then now I still sit in a circle, but with other professionals every week so that we can go through any readings we've had, any difficulties we've had, ask questions, share experiences. So you're always accountable for your work. I think it's really dangerous when someone is working and they're not like around other people, because things inevitably are going to happen to yourself by yourself, and you need someone to share those ideas and bounce those things off. So it's been really invaluable to me. But London College of Psychic Studies is a very famous institution. It's been around again since like the 1800s. The Victorians were really big on paranormal activity, but it originally started as a place where they studied on people like me. So they did a lot of scientific experiments, really tried to understand how it worked scientifically. And there's loads of papers and loads of research that are actually in Cambridge University. And then it became a center of knowledge, and they do lots of teaching on lots of different things. But my teacher, Gary Wright, is like one of the huge people in my life who are really helping me understand my skill and really using it in the best way possible.
And it sounds like you've been through a lot to actually undergo training and refine what you have, which is interesting because I think when you go online, there are some dangers, aren't there? I think you can find these websites. I think The Circle is one that comes to mind, where anybody could just sign up and start doing readings with people over the internet. Is that something that you've seen that is quite a common thing? And what are the dangers around that?
Well, I've had clients come to me who have been for a reading like 10 years ago and have never touched anything to do with like the supernatural, anything ever again, because it was so scary. And that is so not how it should be. My job is not to scare someone. My job is to help someone heal, and is to help someone move their life in a positive way, and to give across messages that are going to allow them to have the confidence to make the changes in their life they need to do. That's what psychic mediumship should be. It should never be a negative thing. And I've had so many people that have gone for readings where the person isn't trained. And like I was saying with the message, you have to understand the full picture of the message you're getting. Because you may get something that feels really dark and gloomy, and you think, oh my God, this is something bad is going to happen to this person. But that's the opposite of the message. The message when something like that comes through to me is maybe that they're in a patch where they need to shift the energy and they've got to move in a different direction. It's not that something bad's going to happen. It's just maybe they're on the wrong path, or you have to really be able to understand what you're getting. And if you go to someone that hasn't had that training, it's very obvious to me because people aren't coming out of the readings in a positive way, and they're not coming out of the readings with skills that they can use to help better their future. I feel really passionate about it. And I have so many people who comment on my work and say it's a load of whatever. But that's probably because they've seen someone that hasn't been trained, or they're used to like seeing a visual of an old lady with a crystal ball and thinking that's how it works. But actually when you understand the science behind it and the training behind it and like seeing the history behind psychic mediumship, it used to be very normal, but we all got killed off at one point. I feel very passionately about making sure whoever you go to has been trained correctly. It's super.
Of course. And that does kind of bring me to the stigma side of things. What are some of the main stigmas and how do you get around them as a professional?
I just ignore them. Honestly, I just have no time for it because I was born with it. It's a different thing. I feel like because I was born with it, when I read something like that, it's a personal attack on me. That's how it feels because I can't change it. And I could have easily brushed this under the rug and not done anything about it, but I know I wouldn't have been living my life's purpose. And so everything has like brought me to this point of like having to do this work. So I just ignore it, but I do see it. And I think it's fair for some of the people because some of the people do step into this world and don't do it correctly. And I do think it's fair that they get called out. But I just try to ignore it. But some of the things that get said are like, oh, just silly off the cuff. I mean, Facebook comments, like trolling comments, and you just have to ignore it and like know that those people are never going to come to you. And it's not my job to persuade anyone. Like I literally couldn't care less if someone doesn't believe in it. Like I don't believe in certain religions. So it's the same thing. Everyone has their own belief system and it's totally up to whatever you believe in. And that's what life should be about. Everyone should have their thing that they believe in and that's okay to believe in. And this is just my one. And if I have people that need guidance and they come to me, that's really all I do. I'm not interested in changing people's opinions.
No, I completely agree. I think it comes back to having an open mind, really. And 99% of people who listen to this, luckily, should have an open mind and be open to it. And of course, there will be naysayers. There will be people who listen to podcasts like this and they think, oh, this is all a load of shit. But it is one of those things. It's like anything, isn't it? It's like politics. It's like wars. There's always going to be two sides. And really, it's going to be the people who come to you and get that value. That's all that matters, really, isn't it, in the end?
Yeah. It's like believe in natural toothpaste and some people believe in fluoride. And you just go with the one that you go with your gut.
Exactly.
And it's just, honestly, yeah.
It's all preference, isn't it, in the end? Now, for people who, I know I've never actually had a session with a psychic. So can you describe a typical session with you for somebody who's new to this?
Yes. So I offer hour and half an hour sittings. And basically when someone comes in for a reading, I'll sit them down and do a brief intro on how I work because often people have gone to someone before and have a very strict idea about how this stuff works, but we're all different. We all work in our unique styles. So I'll kind of explain what I do. And I explain the differences between psychic mediumship. I explain that I see, hear and feel. I'll explain that nothing scary is going to happen. And you can talk in the sitting, you can record it, you can make notes. It's your hour. Like I also give people the space just to have an hour space as well, which is just for them. And then I will typically start tuning in by feeling in their body, feeling in my body, what's going on in their body. So I'll get certain feelings or see certain things or have certain reactions physically in my body when I'm sitting with someone. And that's my like tool for getting in. And then I will sort of tune and read their energy, see where they've gone, see where they're going, see where they've been. And I actually like to break my readings down into sections too. So I always get shown, I've said this before on the podcast, but I always get shown a Trivial Pursuit pie. And my readings are quite fun sometimes. And the pie is like a breakdown for what priorities there are in people's lives. So like if one piece of the pie is really big and it's like a certain color and it's related to work, it shows me I need to go there first and shows me what kind of balance that is in someone's life. It's just a funny way my guides like to kind of help me. And then about halfway through the reading, I'll open the kind of door, if that's what you want to view it as, and see if there's anyone there that wants to come in from the mediumship side. And I often say it's not always the person you want. It's not always the first person you expect at the door. It's the person with the most important message. And they'll kind of come in, we'll describe their energy and come through with a message from them too. And a lot of my work is quite ancestral as well. So sometimes it does go quite far back down the family line, especially if we're trying to heal a pattern or heal a block. Quite often patterns and blocks do go quite far back. And sometimes that comes into a sitting. And then I'll always leave 10 minutes at the end for anyone to ask any questions if they're not sure about something or if they want to delve into something in a bit more detail. And then I always say, which I should have said in the beginning, if you've got a half an hour booking with me, come with what you want to know, because half an hour is not very long. So if it's a specific question or something you really want to get to the bottom of, let's do that first. So you get the full half an hour. In an hour, it normally comes out in the wash what you need to hear. It's very rare that I do a reading and what somebody wants or what somebody has come for, should I say, doesn't come out in that hour. And if it doesn't come out in that hour, there's normally a reason for that. But it does often in the hour. They sort of get what they need, and all the subject kind of that they wanted to talk about do normally get ticked off just naturally. That's kind of how it works. And then I always say to people, never listen to the recording straight away. Don't reread your notes like for 24 hours. Let the energy settle. Let it all like make sense. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to land, and sometimes it doesn't always make sense straight away. I actually spoke to someone before I got on the phone to you. I did a reading for her mum, and she was in the car like 2 years later, and something I said like suddenly rang a bell with what she was doing. Huh. And so it's not right here and now. And I can normally give a good guide of when that is coming in, but often people need to fall into the energy stream they need to go into in order for that thing to happen. So it's far more complicated than one would know.
It sounds it. It does sound it. And something that interested me was when you mentioned your guides. Can you tell me more about them?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I had an experience this weekend about meeting a new one, and you kind of have your team. I kind of call it a team of ancestors, kind of spirits or like helpers that you work with. And when you do the training, it's kind of your job to kind of get to know who that team is. Like I'm the physical person here, and then I have a team on that side helping me get closer to the ones who have passed away, helping me with the messages, helping me clear blocks. And we kind of work as a team. So for me, I know my great-grandfather's on that team. I connect with them all the time. Great-great-grandfather. I know my great-grandmother's on that team. I have other people that I now know the shapes and the energies of, and when like someone comes in and they need a specific something, I can call on that team member to help me shift the energy. So it's a bit like working literally in a team, in an office, just in this world and that world. And they just help you kind of get through the message. That we all work together the same amount, really. So when people think a psychic medium, it's just on that person. That's why they think it's a gift. That's not actually true. There's like a whole team behind it.
So it's about tuning in. Is it almost like a radio? I mean, I could be completely wrong here. Is it almost like tuning into a radio with your guides? Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, it's like because you have to turn it on and off. And so when you turn it on, I always say it's like listening to the noise in between the silence. So, when you're in a really quiet room and you can hear the silence, and it's like, oh, that's really loud because it's so quiet. It sort of feels like that. And you're tuning into the gaps in between what we see in the physical realm. So it's a bit like turning on a radio. You open all your chakras, you get really aligned, and then your team kind of comes in when you're open up and you feel them come in. And then that's how you connect everything together and join the dot.
So as you sit there right now speaking to me, are they there? Can you sense the energies? Can you sense my energy? What does it feel like?
I can't feel yours because it's off. So I turn it off. So it's kind of on to an extent because we're talking about the subject, but I haven't tuned into you specifically. I'd need to actually properly take a minute to actually tune into you, but I don't want to do that while we're recording. But I can kind of feel my guides. If I really tuned into it, I could bring them in, but it's not really the time and place.
No?
I'm very boundaried about it.
That makes sense. That does make sense. And on this show, in many of the episodes I've recorded so far, people talk about time loops, time not being kind of static. It's moving around, and it's a bit like Doctor Who, isn't it? Wibbly wobbly. Now, it's something that's always baffled me. And I think there is quite a famous scientific theory, and it's something many scientists believe, that we might live this exact same life millions and millions and millions of times over, which I think is quite an interesting theory. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is with the spirits that come to you, I imagine many of them are almost live, for want of a better term, and they are coming to you in real time and talking to perhaps your clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, or me through the clients. Yeah, for the clients.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. Have you ever experienced it where perhaps you're seeing almost like a recording or something that's not in real time?
Well, it's interesting. When they come through like a memory too. So when I'm going to call it a dead person because that's what you said. But when a spirit comes through, they'll come through in the way that the person in front of you recognizes them as. So it kind of feels like they're here, but they're also a memory. And this is what I mean by time. I feel like you are sort of tuning into a certain time where they are, and they're allowing me to tune into a time in their life. So it's kind of interesting how it works. But not so much a recording of time, if that's what you meant. It's very much like here and now, but they're coming through as a memory, and they'll often share memories based on that individual person in front of me. Does that make sense? Is that what you want?
Yes, that is. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
I do have experience with time though, which is where my theory comes from, if you want me to share.
Yeah, please.
This is like literally where it came from. But in COVID, stuff got real weird because I live on my own and there was nothing to do. I mean, I was working as well in my other job, but I had a lot of time on my hands. So I became very in tune with everything, more so than I've ever been. And I had a very weird experience where I was on a break from work and I was sitting on my sofa and for some reason I closed my eyes and was like, oh my God, I'm going somewhere. And I felt my whole soul leave my body. And I was like, shit, where's safe to go? And my bubble, the two guys that were in my bubble, I went to their house in like my soul. I was like, we need to go there. It's safe. And I ended up standing behind my friend, looking at her computer, seeing everything she was doing on the computer, seeing everything in the room, the smell. Like I knew she just wanted a glass of orange juice. Like I was in the room. I didn't even know how long for. And then when I woke up out of it, I messaged her and I was like, are you doing this thing on the computer? Like, have you got your glass of orange juice? Is your boyfriend on the sofa playing game, like PlayStation? What's like the smell? I described everything. And she was like, what is happening? And I had this weird experience. So I went like kind of moved through time into her house and came back again. And so since then, it's very hard to know what's real and not. I feel like time is a real concept of like, we can move through it. And yeah, it's really weird. So that was my like initiation into time not being a real thing. And then since then, I've kind of brought it into my practice and sort of helped me understand a little bit about how I move through ancestral lines, and it's all based on time.
And that must have been a really scary experience, that out of body experience that you had, but also I imagine it was pretty cool as well.
Cool. It would have been more scary if I was younger. I wasn't already working and didn't really if I hadn't any idea of what was going on, it would have been. But because I kind of was like, oh, this is like a bit like astral travel. Like, that's cool. Let's just see what happens. It was quite cool. I've only done it once again since then. So it's not a regular occurrence.
And is it something where you feel if you, I don't know, developed that, do you think it's something where you could astral travel, where you could go to other places in space and time? Is that something you believe could happen?
Probably, but do you want to do that? Like, that's the thing with this work. Like, yeah, maybe you could probably do that. But also, like, I feel like you need to be 50% here, 50% in that world. And like, you still have to be realistic that you're a physical person here on a human level to do a job. And so I feel like, yeah, I'm sure you could, but I don't know if I want to do that.
Okay. And that makes sense. And in terms of, we talked about energy a fair bit. And when you are working with clients, I imagine it uses a lot of energy to be able to pull through the readings. Now, how do you protect, or do you have to protect your own energy during readings?
That's why it's off most of the time. Because even now, if it was on, I'd be in 2 different energy streams. And after this, it would just be 10 times more tiring. And so really part of protecting it is learning how to turn it on and off. So it's on only for that hour or for the half an hour, whatever, and then it's off. And it's always on to a certain extent. Like I'm always like a tiny bit aware of, like, my intuition's always very accurate, but it's not on where I'm like hearing things or seeing things, because it's, you know, I only do that when someone is actually coming for a reading. I do feel like any muscle, the more you use it, the less tired you get. So throughout the years now, I'm pretty good. Like I can do 2 solid days with 4 clients a day, and I'm pretty fine. But yeah, it is tiring. You do have to cleanse afterwards. You've got to make sure you eat right. Like for me, chocolate helps me get through it. So for some other psychics, chocolate is a really bad idea. So you have to figure out what works best for your body. And I have set days. So I don't do it on days where I'm not working. So everything is very boundaried, because if it's not boundaried, it seeps into different areas. And then you're not going to be as good as you can be because you haven't boundaried it to that particular time. But definitely with practice, it gets a lot easier. And it is draining when you first start doing it. When you first start working with energy and sort of understanding how your body reacts to it, it is tiring. If you've never had a healing session and you go for a healing session, you'd be knackered. It's just a whole other body system that our time that we're living in isn't really connected to. And so we've forgotten how to tune into it. So when you first go back into it, you're like, oh, that is very tiring. But you just got to boundary it. Any working medium who doesn't boundary their work is not a good one to go to.
Okay, interesting. And I suppose chocolate really does help everything, doesn't it? Not just a tasty snack. Now, in terms of healing, you've mentioned healing a few times there. What does the healing journey look like for a client?
Well, you have to be careful with the word healing, because I'm not a healer. I'm not accredited by the Healing Society. I don't have healing in my practice. When I use the word healing, you come out of the session feeling a lot lighter than when you go in. And I think I can use this with those who are passed over. There is a lot of healing that happens with those on the other side, especially if someone comes to me and someone's passed away and they haven't finished a conversation, and that conversation happens in my sitting, and it makes both parties feel like they can now move on with their lives. That's a healing process for me. Equally, if there's a pattern, like a family pattern running through something, and nobody's ever understood why this pattern or this thing keeps happening through family generations, if we can go back to the source and to the spirit or the ancestor where it started and understand why that pattern took place. That is often very healing for the family line too. So I use healing in the context of that rather than actually like hands-on healing or being an accredited healer, because that's not what I am. And there are amazing ones out there. It's just a different thing. But it's a lot of closure. It's a lot of reassurance, and it's a lot of giving people confidence. I feel like what a psychic medium does is see the bits that someone has hidden from everyone else. You can't really hide much from a psychic medium based on your like personality and your soul and the stuff you've done in your life. And if someone is finding it very hard to see themselves and I'm able to see them and show that to them, that's also very healing too. So it's a lot about self-worth in a session more than actually talking to the dead.
Okay, that is very, very interesting.
You wouldn't think that when you come for a read.
No, you wouldn't, would you? No, it's. I think it kind of goes against everything that people think happens during these readings.
Yeah, they think you come and they're going to tell you you're going to get married on this day, and then or whatever this is going to happen. Actually, it's far more about like, how can we help you be the best person you can be? What can I shift and get out the way? And also with stuff like that, with psychic predictions, obviously they're pretty much correct. But there is always stuff that gets in the way. Like people can always change the way that things are meant to go. So I might say something based on the energy that I'm reading in the here and now, and then they may do something completely left field, shift the energy completely, which means that thing that I read in that sitting is no longer the case because they've moved the energy in a completely dramatic different way. So, fate and people's choices do get in the way a lot of predictions.
And has that energy ever gone south? So have you ever had a reading where the energy's gone really negative and you've had to stop the session perhaps?
Yeah, I've had a few people where I'm not the person to read them. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes someone comes in and I'm like, I just know that I'm not your reader. And I've said to them, I'm really sorry, it's nothing to do with you, but I just know that I'm not going to be the best person for you. So let me suggest you X, Y, Z. And that's why it's really good to have the group that I sit in, because there's someone with a different energy. There's always one person with a different type of energy. So there's someone for someone to go to at all times in that group. So if someone comes in and I just know they're not the right fit, but there's another person in my courses, I'll direct them over there, refund them and move them over. I want someone to come and have like the best reading ever. So I don't want to force myself to do a reading with someone where our energies are just so unaligned that it doesn't work. So that has happened a few times. And sometimes it's happened where I'll be in a reading and I just feel like I need to stop. Like for some reason, my guides have moved away and my whole body is like, you just need to stop. And that's happened a few times when it's not the right person, not the right time for the person. They've come and actually it's not the right time. And I've said that and I've refunded them and be like, come back when you're ready. And it's also happened when some people are testing you, because I can feel when someone's testing me. And if they've come just to be tested and they don't actually come with the intention of getting something good out of it, I know. And there's no point in me putting my energy into it because I know they're just trying to test me. And so I do feel that sometimes. I'm happy to do it, but it has a different energy stream. And sometimes I'm just like, I'd rather spend this energy on someone that actually wants to come with good intentions. So that has happened a few times. And I think what you said there kind of crushes, probably for a lot of listeners, some of the stigmas as well of psychics or mediums or psychic mediums telling you things that you just want to hear. If you're going to be refunding your client and saying, this isn't for me, that gives you a lot more credibility, I'd imagine, for a lot of people. Well, hopefully, because that's what a good psychic medium should do. It's like literally not in my interest to give you a bad reading because I'm not doing my job. And like, I've trained so hard to do this job. And I think the other thing I'm so passionate about is all the women before me generationally that were like across the world killed for being witches or like persecuted or all this thing. It's finally time for our generation to be okay standing up to do this work. And so if I then do something like that is like shady or like a bad job, I feel that I'm letting down like all the women before me. So it's not just my guilt. I feel my guilt on like everyone else before me that couldn't do this work out there. So I feel like I'm actually carrying quite a big weight and I feel like I need to be respectful of that. And if I'm just not going to give someone a bad reading for the sake of it. I'd rather they go somewhere else.
And that sounds very responsible and reasonable to me. Now, just as we come to close off and before we talk about more about your services and where people can find your services and book a session, what advice would you give to somebody listening who might be interested in developing their own psychic abilities?
I would say always trust your intuition. And it's so funny. It's come up so much for me lately. Like, what's the first thing you always say to someone? And the first thing you have to do is trust yourself. Get in touch with your intuition really and like really trust it. Everyone has that voice in their head or in their gut or in their heart, that thing where you know something's not right, that niggle, and you just don't listen to it and then something goes wrong and you're like, shit, I should have listened to like myself. The first thing you need to do is get very comfortable with the fact that you have to listen to your intuition. It's always right. And then the second thing I say is just go with the flow with it. Like this world and this work is so like crazy actually if you really think about it. Like I have another job that's like very normal and then I do this thing on like a Thursday and Friday and it's like so weird, but you kind of just have to go with how it works. Like, trust the process, trust how things unfold. And like, if somebody told me when I was 19 that I'd be working professionally in this, I would never have believed that in a million years. And so you just have to go with where it takes you. And then definitely find someone that you can trust. Find a teacher, go to a reader that you really trust and that you've worked with, and like ask them for help and ask them for advice, because every good psychic medium wants to bring others up too. It's not my job to be like, oh no, I'm the only psychic medium. Like, the more of us are out there that are like more conscious to ourselves and conscious to others, we're better to the planet, we're better to our friends and the people around us. The more in touch with your intuition you can be, and the more you can flow through this work and trust that it's all going to be fine. That would be what I would do. But get trained. If you really want to be a professional in this work, 100% do the training. Don't think you can do it without it.
And I think that's probably helped a lot of people. That sounds like really sound and very solid advice. So thank you very much for that, Danielle. And
make one more point.
Of course you can.
Training. The other thing is with this work, it can be really heavy. Like, you're dealing with everyone's emotions all the time. You're dealing with the people that have passed away. You're dealing with their emotions. And then if something happens in your life that's quite emotional at the same time, trying to juggle all three things is really hard. And I think that also part of the training as well is learning how to manage others' energy and your own and the dead, and make sure that it doesn't burn you out, and make sure you can have a normal life while also giving like enough space to your clients to heal and grow. So that's also part of the training. It's really a responsibility to your clients.
And in terms of your services, where can our listeners find more information about your services and book a session with you?
So you can find it all under danielleclose.co.uk. I'm based in Brighton, so I practice in real life in Brighton and Hove. And then I do a lot of Zoom sessions. That's the other thing. People always think, like, how can you do this over Zoom? But it works exactly the same way. This, again, about the time thing, you're just like tuning into someone through time. And you can book an hour session or a half an hour session. Also, if you have any questions, like, just ask me, email me. You can find me on Instagram under Danielle C. Close. But yeah, I'm like super open to talking about it. And I feel like the more we talk about it, the more normal we make it for everyone, so that other teens or kids don't have to go through what I did when I was a kid. So I feel very passionate about it.
And I like to think that a lot of people are becoming more open to this sort of thing. And these podcasts are becoming very popular, and a lot of people are listening to it because they've got an open mind, rather than listening to it to just go, oh yeah, she's talking a load of shit. and hopefully that, people will approach you after listening to this and hopefully get some value from you. So thank you so much for joining the show. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I've learned a lot.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you. And just keep an open mind, everyone.
Thanks, Danielle. What a great episode, and thank you for listening. If you would like to have a chance at appearing on a future episode, and you've got a scary story to tell, whether it's UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, or something else you can't explain, please get in touch at info@angryfoxmedia.com. Stay safe out there.